Hey guys, so I'm sure you probably do a lot of mixing in your DAW. You probably use a lot of compressors in your DAW as software, and you might be using kind of basic compressors. You might be using compressors that are emulators, but let me tell you from experience that the software emulator compressors, they are not quite the same as the hardware ones. So to give you a little bit of an idea of how some of the hardware ones work, I'm going to be comparing for you today 3 different hardware compressors, all from the perspective of the snare top. So before I talk about the compressors, let me talk a little bit about the sound source running into them. As you can see, I have 4 mics set up on my snare. These are all Sennheiser E604s. This is on a 14-inch by 5.5-inch DW ply maple snare, has reinforcing hoops on it. All 4 microphones are running into API preamps, and then the first channel of that is going to be going straight into my audio interface. So this is going to be the no compressor track, so you can use that as kind of your baseline compared to all the others. The second channel is going to be running through a DBX 166 compressor. They've since replaced this with the 266, but it's basically the same thing. These DBX compressors, they're a cheaper to mid-level priced compressor. They definitely get the job done, but I prefer other hardware compressors if you're going to be going down that route. I find that the DBX, or at least the 166, it seems to add a lot of noise. It really kind of brings up the noise floor. And it like I said, it does the job, but it doesn't really add any studio magic from my perspective. But you'll kind of get to hear how it sounds compared to the other ones as well. The third channel is going to be running through a Universal Audio 1176 compressor. So this is a really well-known, really famous compressor. Waves makes emulators of it. UA, of course, makes emulators of it as well. So this is, like I said, it's really well known. One thing that I find that the emulators don't do well here is to capture the kind of sonic sound of it. The software seems to emulate the responsiveness of the compressor, but the hardware ones, it adds some tone to the sound that I don't find really gets captured in the software version. So, you might find based on your sound source, you may want to run your sound through an 1176 in a 1-to-1 ratio just to kind of get that extra tone out of the compressor. So it's a really good compressor. It's definitely on the higher end of the spectrum. Finally, we're going to be running through an Empirical Labs Distressor. This is another great high-end compressor, and it's actually the compressor in my setup that I leverage the most often. One of the really nice things about this compressor is depending on which ratio that you're using, it actually uses different kind of internal hardware, and you get different types of compression out of it. So for example, there's a British mode on it, which is basically the same as an all-in mode that you would see on the 1176. There's a opto compressor if you're using the 10-to-1. There's a limiter, there's a brick wall limiter. So there's all different types of compression that you can get out of it based on what your needs are. My favorite thing about this is that even if you hit the compressor really, really hard, if you're bringing down a lot of decibels out of it, it still doesn't sound compressed. It still has a little bit of air to it. Another nice thing about it is that it has some second order harmonic or third order harmonic that you can add to the sound as well if you want to, give it a little bit of flavor. So to try to keep things consistent across the 3 different compressors, I'm going to try to use similar settings. So a 4-to-1 ratio on all 3 compressors, the middle attack and middle release settings on the respective compressors. And I'm going to try to bring down the amount of decibels by about 6. And I'm going to be judging those levels with the snare on and just using single hits. That's how I'm going to judge the -6 levels. So I hope you find that useful. I hope it helps you select some higher end gear, some higher end compressors for your setup when you're building out your studio. If there's some other compressors that you really like, whether it's on snare or bass or something else, I'd love to know about, so let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more videos like this about, selecting higher end hardware for your studio, then don't forget to subscribe.